Just wanted to welcome everyone. I mean, fantastic to see you all here. I mean, my name's Luke Bourgeois. I'm the high performance director at Voyager Tennis Academy. And again, super excited to have Nick Scott. Nick is the director of 135 Tennis Analytics. So Nick, welcome to jump online tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Luke. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Again, I guess before we start, it's a little bit of housekeeping. Would ask you to start by putting your microphone on mute. We will have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you do want to put questions in the chat box, we will make time at the end as well. But just helps us sort of keep a clean sort of run. But again, yeah, really excited. As I mentioned before, this is to me something that was always such a big part of my game. It really is about mastering the art of holding serve. Again, it's fantastic to have Nick. Again, we've been able to learn so much with our academy players in what we're doing with our sort of, again, our analytics and looking at a lot of their development. And obviously we can see it right now at the US Open. You can see it in every match. And I think this is one thing, Nick, for me, which is, again, obviously the game can change, trends can change, but this is one thing that hasn't. You just see with the success at the top level, again, really clear outcomes that happen here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And over time, the numbers remain relatively similar in terms of how the best players hold serve and the strategies they use to hold serve. They have this innate ability from all sorts of weird and wonderful positions to hold serve, to never throw their service games away, and to know how small the percentages are in this sport.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I guess to sort of address it, I mean, to me, as a coach, I always look at it, there's how to hit the ball and how to play the game. We are, again, I mean, we are sort of, again, I'm going to create some opportunities here. I've done some previous webinars with Dr. Mark Kovacs. For those that don't know or know of Mark, he's known as one of the leading serve specialists in the world. We will share that webinar from the past. And I guess to address it as well, I think there is some athletic requirements that we look at with the serve. And it is. And I think that's one of the things that we see generally. A lot of the kids that we now see, that a lot of them become very good with their thumbs. Again, how they sort of spend a lot of their downtime compared to, obviously, I guess for Nick, for us as kids, we would be doing everything under the sun. You'd be out, you'd be throwing, you'd be catching. There were some athletic requirements there that did sort of, again, help us have what I love to call a lively arm, which definitely helps. But it's not just about the sort of the physical traits of the serve bots that we see. It's definitely, again, an art for all. So, Nick, if you want to sort of start the slide deck there for us.
I will. Thanks, Luke. And just to finish on what you were saying, for the mums and dads who have followed tennis out there, the third best holder of serve on tour in 1999 was the man who was known as the greatest returner of the time, Andre Agassi. He wasn't just a returner. The man could also hold serve. So he could be aggressive on his return games. Thank you all for having me tonight. I hope you get something out of all the things that Luke and I are about to say and discuss. I won't keep everybody too long. We want to get through this. We want to get through the athletic requirements of the serve, but that will take a bit of a back seat. I know Luke will provide some information on a previous webinar, but we do want to go through something we call the 105 benchmark, what that is, how it measures how well a player is serving, and how we can benchmark that at different stages. We also want to have a quick look at common errors made by junior players on serve. So what are they doing perhaps not so well or well? Some serving strategies and some takeaways and questions. So we will have some question time at the end. I know that, Luke, you wanted to talk very quickly about the webinar with Mark Kovacs.
Yeah, I did briefly mention that, but again, it's something that I really found amazing. I was quite fortunate to spend a lot of time with Mark on some Tennis Australia tours through Europe and the States, and having done work with Mark, if again, for parents, for coaches, for players, there's some great information there, because it is a really important part, is the element of how to hit the ball. And obviously, again, that sort of that decline in the throwing capacity, it definitely does. I know for me, it's something, if you have seen the movie King Richard, I know my coaches, when I was a kid, there's a scene there where Richard Williams has the kids just throwing tennis rackets. To me, it was actually one of the techniques our coaches did teach us. And I think you see culturally too, typically a lot of the Americans have great serves, because you look at the national pastime of both baseball and football, a big component is actually that throw motion. So again, for the youngsters, I know my kids are 10 and 12. We do. It's one of the things we get out and throw the vortex around and have fun with it, because it definitely does help in the long run. So.
Right. And for those who don't know, I'm the strategist. Luke is most certainly the better man when it comes to athletic requirements, technicals, etc. I'm very big on the strategy, the analytics, and the analysis of a game. So onto the 105 benchmark. The 105 benchmark might be new to most players, probably not to the Voyager players out there, but to a lot of players, the 105 benchmark might be new. It's fairly simple. What we do is we take the percentage of times a player holds their serve. So this is over time. Could be over a year, could be over 4 matches, could be over a career. The percentage of times a player holds serve, and we are adding that to the percentage of times a player breaks serve. All right. Now, if we add those two things together, for a player to be successful over time at tennis, that number needs to be over 105. So to put that in context, if a player is holding serve 80% and breaking their opponent 25%, they're at 105. They are going to win matches. If, on the other hand, it's 75-25, they're not going to win as many matches in all probability. And we do have benchmarks for all of this over 12s, 14s, 16s into college and pro. So it's a measure of effectiveness. How effective is not only a player's serve, but a player's game. So because it is measuring how well they return serve, as well as how well they serve, but we do want to focus on how well a player holds serve and the strategies they use to do that tonight. I want to emphasize one big thing. There's a lot of talk about how 0 to 4 represents a big majority of points in tennis, 0 to 4 rally lengths, so the shorter rallies. That's not what this is about. Yes, it's true to say that 0 to 4 represents 70% of tennis. That's not untrue. But when the score is 30-40, that's when most long rallies happen. So we need to put that in the context of other factors. This is not just about being able to execute aces or short rallies, or, as Luke said, serve bots. So let's have a look at a few pro players and where their 105 benchmark is. So first of all, the top 3 players in the world on the male side. This is the ATP side. We'll get to the WTA in a sec. The top 3 players in the world, you can see that their 105 rates are almost identical. Sinner, being number 1 in the world, is at 117. Djokovic at 116. Alcaraz 116. Just to be clear, that's just adding their hold rate to the percentage of time they break their opponent. For Sinner, it's 91 and 26. Djokovic, 87-29, Alcaraz, 84-32. And when I look at these numbers, I'm amazed that there are different ways of getting to the same number. All right. Alcaraz does not hold serve quite as often. For those interested, Alex de Minaur is at 81-32. He's actually one of the best breakers of serve on tour. But why he's not up with the top 3 is that he is not holding serve as effectively or as often as the big 3. All right. To put that into some sort of context, on the Challenger men's tour, the average is only around 73-28. Now, I keep mentioning the word context, and I'm going to say it again. 75%, and when I'm consulting to junior players about their hold rate, and once they're up around 16 or 17, they could well be at a 75% hold rate. But let's put that into context. 75% sounds good. It means you're holding 3 out of 4 service games, which means that you will have to break your opponent's serve twice to win the set in anything other than a tiebreaker. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. A hold rate of 75 means you are going to have to break your opponent's serve twice to win the set on average. That's really important to understand. Once you get up to 80 and 83%, on average, you are going to hold your serve. You're only going to be broken once every 2 sets, and that's such a big advantage. And it's the advantage that Sinner, Djokovic, and Alcaraz have. Okay, So Challenger Tour average at 73.21, and that's why those players are probably not moving up to ATP level. On the women's side, they're not holding serve as often. They are breaking serve more. Iga Swiatek is up at 129. This is for this year so far. That is a big number, 129. You do have to remember there are a lot of blowout scores on the WTA. Sabalenka and Goff are very interesting. Again, two different ways to get to a very similar number. Ash Barty in her best year, or one of her best years on tour, the year she won Wimbledon, 2021, she was at 121, 81% hold rate, and she broke her opponent's serve 40% of the time. Again, this is not just about serve bots. Ash Barty is, Luke, help me out, 5'5".
Yeah, she's not an overbearing sort of tall athlete, but it's again some amazing skills of what she can do. Technically, so clean. Obviously, the ability to hit parts of the court, getting different spins, variety too, and to me, the most important part it's how her serve sets up her three, how that serve sets up her first shot.
And we're going to get into a little bit of that a little later on, how to improve service game holds, again, in the context of what you do with your serve. So they're just some of the WTA numbers. When we're looking at the implications of this for junior players as they move through the levels from 12s through to 14s through to 16s. Now, it should be fairly apparent that hold rates increase. As players get better at serving, the amount of times that they can hold serve increases. But by the same token, the break rate, the amount of times you are going to be able to break serve, will go down. And what we're finding in all the research we do with all the players we work with around the world is that is inevitable. You cannot, there are very few players who are able to keep their break rate, their ability to break their opponent's serve at the high level that they were at in the 12s and into the 14s. Okay, so this really is about, and the reason for this webinar tonight is all about how are we going to hold our serve better. Okay, so to run through how that looks from the 12s to the 14s and into the 16s, these are average numbers. So if we're taking a whole group of thousands of players, it will add up to about 100. But in the 12s, we're looking at about 40% of the time service games are held by the server, and there are 60% break. Okay, so serves are not as heavy, they're not as well placed, there are more breaks of serve. As soon as we're in the 14s, all of a sudden that hold rate is up at 55. Okay, so it's already gone up to 55, and there is a really big important part of that number, which I'll get to in a second. Once we're in the 16s, we're at 65%. We're still only at 6.5 out of 10 in the 16s, but better players are able to get that number higher. And you can see how not only does the hold rate go up on your own serve, but the break rate of your opponent's serve goes down. Okay. I'm going to say this twice. I don't normally write big sentences on my presentations, as Luke knows, but this one is vital for every junior parent and every player and every coach to understand. Juniors who have better than average win rates on serve, in other words, how often they hold their serve, in each age group are more likely to reach higher levels of tennis. I'm going to say that again, because that's if you take away nothing more from tonight, juniors who have better than average win rates on their own serve in each age group are more likely to reach college tennis, pro tennis. If you are relying on breaking your opponent's serve by the time you are in the 14s, if you're relying on breaking your opponent's serve to win matches, it's not going to carry you through to the higher levels down the track, college professionalism. Luke, you got?
Yeah, it really is. And I know obviously, again, this is something dear to my heart. I mean, I've got so many times. I mean, I've worked with some great coaches, and one of the mantras of one of my coaches who made a huge impact in my career was really simple: if you can hold serve, you can compete with anybody. And that literally became the mantra of the game, and trying to ensure that you hold on to every service game, and again, build pressure. And it's just one of the things that I'm seeing. It's typically we see progress. What I would say here, this is an area that I'm actually seeing decline across the broad spectrum of how kids are actually playing. Again, there's that athletic requirement, which you touched on earlier, which is part of it. But again, I think there's different things that we're seeing in how people train. Again, also, people are returning better. There's no doubt. Obviously, there's a lot more double-handed backhands now than one-handers. But I think it's just one of those things we can't stress enough, that the focus actually shifts to this part of your game.
Yeah. All right. Let's give a little bit more depth to this. Oops, sorry. Go back to previous. So if I provide the example of, we know that the average in the 14s is 55-45. Holding serve is around 55% of the time. Breaking serve is around 45% of the time. Now, if I present two players, based on all the research that we've done, we work with Tennis Canada, academies in the US and Europe, in Asia. If I present two players, player one is holding serve 61% and breaking serve 44%. Right, so they're above average on the hold rate, but slightly below on the break rate. And I know that player two is at 51% hold rate and 54% break rate. Both of those players have a 105 benchmark of, right on it, 105. But what we've been able to prove is that player one, in that scenario, the player who holds serve above average, will have a greater chance of going on to higher levels of tennis through 16s, college, and beyond. Not the player who is only holding serve 50 and breaking 50, because it becomes more difficult to break serve as you go through. All right. So we would suggest, we would not only suggest, we know that that player in the middle has a much greater likelihood to succeed as an adult player. All right. If they're developing those skills to hold serve at an earlier stage of tennis, not just waiting until they're 16 or even 15. So it's all very easy for me as an analyst or Luke as a coach to sit and suggest, you need to win more service games. It's a little bit like saying you lost because you made too many errors. We need to be able to quantify that. We need to be able to say, okay, you need to improve your 105 rate. You need to be able to hold serve more often. Now, in all the consultations that I've done with juniors throughout this year and last year, both here and overseas, the number one thing, I should have done a poll on this, Luke, the number one thing that players need to learn how to do better in order to hold their serve is simply to hit spots. I know, well, I say simply, it's not that simple. Hitting spots on serve. Now, hitting spots, a lot of people think that body serves are very effective things, and they are. But body serves are actually only used about around 10% of the time on the ATP, around 20% of the time on the WTA. A body serve being, how often did you use a body serve, Luke, in your professional career?
Yeah,
Rarely?
I would say, yeah, less than. I mean, I still use it. Obviously, I could generate a lot of heat. I think my fastest serve I hit was 235. So having that ability to get some power and also jump, I used to love using my kicker to bring people up in the court and then change it up. But I'll probably say less than 30% of the time.
Okay. Now, when I talk to players about hitting spots on serve, I'm not talking about the body serve. Just to put it in perspective, a body serve is actually very easy to get wrong, because if you're aiming at your opponent's body and you're slightly out, you're probably right in their hit zone. Whereas if you're aiming for the corners of the box and you're slightly out, you're probably not going to hit it right in their hit zone. So what we talk about, or what I talk about when I'm talking to players, is the outer sixths, not the middle third. So I don't break the service box. So players, please pay attention. I don't break, when I'm analyzing the way a player plays, I don't divide the service box into third, third, third. I break it into a sixth, then 2/3 is the entire middle, and then the sixth on the other side. So it's a small piece of real estate that you're aiming your serve into. And the reason that's important is because, number one, less serves come back when you hit those spots. We know it. We know it at the professional level. We know it at the college level. We know it at the junior level. But the other thing is you set up better threes and fives. And this is vital for junior players to understand. Diego Schwartzman, who is retiring this week from professional tennis, is 5'7", and he's the greatest fives player I think I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is he puts his serve into a corner of the box, which sets up the next shot, which he will approach the net behind and put the volley away on shot 5. So this is not about bombing serves. This is not about hitting aces. This is about having a plan for how you are going to win more points on your serve using hitting the serve to spots and then executing on 3 and 5. And this is not just first serve, this is second serve as well. So the other thing that I wanted to mention about improving your service game hold rate is this word that I keep coming back to, and it's context. I use it all the time. And context, what we're talking about here is, first of all, when I watch junior players play, and I'm known by the Canadians as the guy who watches more junior tennis than anybody else in the world. I can't actually confirm that, but it's probably not far off.
I think you're up there, mate. Definitely.
Thank you. So what we're talking about here, when I'm watching a player play, a junior player play, they generally do what they like to do. In context, the most important player on the tennis court is your opponent. It's trying to figure out what they are doing. And when you are serving, it's all about, first of all, are they left or right-handed? So is my wide serve to the deuce court going to be more effective because I'm into their backhand as they are left-handed? Are they standing close to the baseline to return serve? And if that's the case, is my wide serve going to be as effective as if they're standing 5 meters behind the baseline? If a player has a wide serve to deuce in their kit bag, it's their best serve, it may not work against all opponents. You need to know, and a player should be able to work this out within a few games of the first set, even if they've never seen them before, what a player is good at. So the most important player on the court is not you. You're the second most important player on the court, because then it comes down to how you match up, how your serving strategies match up against the person up the other end, the guy or girl down the other end. All right. You may have to change into a change to a different strategy. They might be standing very close, in which case a body serve will be effective. You might notice a certain way they split step. All of these things come into your decision making when you serve. Third piece of context that is vital to understand is what's the score? What is the score? Is it 5-love, 40-love? Is it 4-all, 30-all? Is it break point, 30-40? One thing I know from all the consultations I've done with junior players, the two most common answers to the question, which I always ask, so if you haven't had me consult to you yet, then be prepared for this question. The score is 4-all, 30-all, you are serving. What's your strategy? And the most common answer I get is And the second most common answer is probably. And what's happening is that's coming from players who actually don't know what their best play is at that score. Okay? Your opponent, yourself, the score. They're the three contextual elements. I said at the outset that I'm a bit more of a strategist. Luke is the technical man. I'll get him to cover off a little bit on coach delivery on that issue.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good one, Nick, because it's one of the things that I've seen how, again, even I know with my coaching now, I discuss grips, swing paths, and again, often it's about so you can actually look to either avoid or exploit different areas of the game. So often I see, again, some of our stronger players will go fast to a really solid two-handed backhand and not understanding that ball's going to be back on them super quick. So it really does help to be a technician. Again, and I know we sort of talk about the coach delivery side of it. For me, from the score component, often this is where I try to encourage people to have really sound in between game and routines, obviously change of end routines, because so often we see people, again, switching off on that changeover, not really sort of understanding, then coming out to play. Because to me, the most important of the service game is actually the first point. When you can execute on that first point, because I know the stats actually, it's super high, your conversion rate when you get to 31st. So again, if you can convert on that first point, you get two bites of the cherry to get. So there's so many elements here that I see that really all leads up to it. Because I think again, that's more so from the sort of the athlete's eyes, and that's what I really encourage people to understand: is look at all elements, try to really dig away and understand, learn the game. But from the coach's perspective, this is what I really see is one of the biggest mistakes in how we train the kids, because often it can be the last 10 minutes of a private lesson. It literally is put on the absolute end off. And by the way, I forgot to serve. Often too, you're seeing groups, typically with kids, it's where there's the least engagement. I know for me, I have one of my favorite games, which I call Bullseye. And as I'm getting the kids to hit, I've got target areas, I've gamified it. So they're actually really focusing on being able to hit spots. And that's where, again, it sort of comes back to how coaches really do look at that concept. Because, again, if we reverse engineer matches, it is about holding serve. So what proportion of time is being spent in and around that? Because, and again, sort of touching on it, part of that of hitting targets in isolation is an element that we need to be able to sort of refine through repetition. But to me, it's the sequencing. I think that's where I see, to me, really trying to make sure we sequence in to understand your patterns of play and they're working, and you work on them. I know, Nick, we most common see errors on three, where people obviously can connect with a good quality serve. The player does hit a good return, and they're just spraying balls around it and really not understanding how that really can sort of all equate up to. Those little loose errors can be the difference between winning and losing. But again, I just really encourage all the kids out there, again, to at times go and spend time. If you can get access to a court, some balls, get out there and actually practice this. Because I think, Nick, for you, I know we've talked about this before, often seeing as well the proportion of time spent playing matches to training, again, is really shifted. Um, I know I try to encourage people to try to play around 10 practice sets per week. And that's when you can actually start trying to put all this together. And when you do, really own it, really own the idea of the importance of this. And Nick, I don't know, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you, but we had two J200 ITFs out at Olympic Park recently. And one of my old training buddies and competitors was Wayne Arthurs. He was there with one of his Tennis Australia roles. And I remember being, again, he's a professional. We were in Cincinnati practicing our serve. And typically I was sort of, again, I remember having a conversation with Wayne. And for those who don't know Wayne, he was a really handy player. I think his highest ranking was 43 in the world. And he used to have the record for most consecutive games held. He held serve 111 times in a row from qualifying through to the fourth round of Wimbledon, where the player you mentioned earlier, Andre Agassi, broke him in the second set of that match. And it was just the ability to really just zone in, like understand, hey, this is the key part of our game, ensuring that when you do, that you actually really are focusing on doing it with great quality. Because again, can't stress enough, I've seen so many great players that are great ball strikers. It was one of the comments Wayne made to me watching a lot of these good juniors play. Again, we're talking about kids that are 150 in the world at the ITF level. You need to understand, if you do want to play professionally, you might only get one or two looks at someone's serve in sometimes even in a match. And if you're giving people a look at every single one of your service games, it's just, again, it's going to be pretty tough to actually get over the top of those really strong servers. And again, not just talking about the boys here, a lot of the girls are very, I mean, you look at a Sabalenka, they have a lot of very, very good servers out there. So again, would encourage you to highlight the importance, to allocate the time to it. And again, not just in isolation, it is a part, but if you can actually look to do it in building blocks, I know I try to do it every day in my sessions with our academy players to really help them play at the highest level.
I'm going to mention at this point, a lot of people out there know I worked with Thanasi Kokkinakis for 18 months a couple of years ago. He had a great win this morning over
Huge win.
Stefanos Tsitsipas at the US Open. And one thing that we know, having worked with Thanasi, everybody knows about his serve. His most effective serves were not the 215 bombs, the 215 kilometre an hour bombs. They were the 190 to 195 serves, and there are reasons for that. Let's try and understand them. The first reason why the big bomb serve was not as effective is because it's less accurate. It doesn't hit the spots as well. The second reason is that the harder you hit it, the faster it comes back. And this is where we need to be practicing in context, because shot three, you start recovering for shot three on 1 foot from about 30 centimeters inside the baseline with your right foot going backwards. There is no similar position to that to recover, and you need to practice it. And the more you practice it, the better your threes will be. But I just needed to mention that it's not about serving hard. It is about hitting spots, and that was what Ash Barty was a master at. The last thing I do want to mention, it's a little bit self-serving to mention, but improving service game hold rates is also about profiling your game, knowing who you are. Right? This is what I go through every time I'm talking to a player. Knowing who you are, benchmarking where you are now, and measuring that over time so that you're trying to improve all facets, all aspects of your game. This isn't, as I said, just about serving. This is about returning as well. Tonight we've focused on the serve. Perhaps we'll do a webinar on the return game in the future. But tonight is all about improving that service game hold rate. And to improve it, I know it's one of Luke's mantras, we need to be able to measure it. All right. Just a couple of examples of Voyager players from recent ITFs and tournaments hitting spots on serve. I'm hoping this uploads fast enough. So wide serve to deuce. This one, T serve to the ad side and the volley. These are sorts of things that players can practice. In the girls, the same. Wide serve to ad, forehand in behind, and from exactly the same match, wide serve to ad, sets up, shot three. Your serve is not something that the one thing that I see a lot in junior tennis is that players are stepping up to the line, and their number one hope at 30, 40, when they are standing up at that line to serve, the number one hope is, I hope my serve doesn't come back. And it's the wrong way to look at it. Because the best players in the world, the way they look at it is, I'm going to serve wide to deuce based on what my opponent's doing, what I know I can do, and what the score is. Once they've executed that wide serve to deuce, they expect the ball to come back, and they are fairly sure what they will do based on that serve and where they will put shot three. There is a plan to it. Luke worked a lot with Roger Federer a while ago. Late in his career, I guarantee you that at love 30 down on his own serve, Roger Federer would be serving wide to the deuce side. He would then step back and to his left to play a forehand to the open court. He'd then come into the net and cover the volley. That would be his plan for love 30 on serve. Luke?
Yeah, and you say that the amount of, again, I felt really fortunate to spend 3 years traveling with Roger and being part of 6 of his Grand Slam wins. The amount of times we practiced those sequences was just, again, it's being able to sort of perform under pressure. It comes through the repetition. And it's one of the things that he was, again, known for so many things. One of them not was necessarily his professionalism, but it's just, again, you can learn from the best. For me, what I've seen is absolutely critical, and you can see why. Having that plan in those pressure moments and be able to commit to it, obviously that's a huge part of being able to execute under pressure.
Key takeaways from tonight before we get to some questions. I want to emphasize that you cannot view your serve as a rally starter. There are too many players in the lower age groups of tennis, boys and girls, who are using their serve to start the point or to start the rally. It can't be that way. You need to move beyond that, and we need to move beyond that earlier than the 14s or 16s. The more it's trained earlier, the better, and the better equipped a player will be at 13, 14, 15, 16, and the more able they will be to hold serve. So start development early and don't view the serve as a rally starter. I'm going to defer just for 1 second to studies we do for a major federation around the world where their 14s players from last year were runners-up in the World Team Championships. They were highly successful, and their team hit spots on serve. This year, they're nowhere to be seen because they're using serves as rally starters. About 60% of serves going to the middle of the box. So it's a very interesting comparison to make. Know your 105. What are you doing? Where are you at? You need to be able to measure. You need to be able to profile. You need to be able to benchmark in order to know where your game is at. And as Luke mentioned before, practicing in context. So not just practicing a serve, not just practicing a forehand or a backhand, but practicing what comes after the serve. There are ways to practice that. What comes after the serve? What comes after my shot 3? Where am I going to be for shot 5? So I didn't want to keep people long tonight. If there are any questions, Luke, have you got questions?
Not at this point, but if
No?
anyone does, yeah, please fire them through. But it's Nick, it's interesting. Obviously, you're talking about starting early. My son is loving his tennis. He's 10. I do a little bit, don't necessarily coach him. The different dynamic between a dad and a son as a coach
I remember
is,
it, Luke. I remember it, you know.
yeah, it's interesting. But I'll be clear. We have forsaken the gains that you can get from being consistent to being really around focusing on serve. So even at a super early age, had a really strong continental grip to allow him to start putting different spins from slice to kick. And now as a 10-year-old, he can hit different parts of the box. And again, he's really enjoying his tennis. And I think one of the reasons having a good throwing arm is part of it. But that's where, for me, from a development perspective with my own son, is where we're over investing time in that area. And I think the idea of what I'm seeing, it's may come at a cost of some short-term opportunities and goals, but I know long-term, if he wants to be a good player, just the importance of it. And that's where I think, if you can, it's a really key area to look at making sure we develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, focus on the development rather than the wins. I know that's a very difficult thing to do, both for parents and for juniors.
Yeah, especially in this day and age with UTR and all the different things that are in and around that. But again, it's about setting that ceiling really high so you can actually perform at the highest level. It's a really key thing.
Yeah.
Nick, I think that's again.
That's a wrap.
It is. I think it is. And I just again, Nick, I wanted to thank you for your time. But I again, having worked so closely with you, and again, all my athletes that I am coaching are using your services as well. To me, what I love about this is the clarity that it gives. I mean, not just for me, I mean, for the players, but also for me as a coach. Like, it really helps understand exactly where we get the most bang for the buck and what you really need to work on.
Yeah.
So again, really appreciate your time. I think there's some great things in there to see. For those, if you can, get out and watch the US Open. I know it's hard behind that paywall with Stan. If you can, have a look at it. But it's so important to see the pros, because there is purpose to almost every serve that you typically see them using. The way they hit that ball, the sequences they've developed, they're trying to get their favorite shot on 3 and to me, put their opponents into defense so they can get the upper hand in the rally. But yeah, again, Nick, thanks so much, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Luke. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance, and happy days on the court.